Welcome back. It is time for the second part of tonight's debate. We're discussing Greece and what the future may be for its place within the Eurozone. Also, what changes to the Eurozone and indeed to Europe more broadly may be brought about as a result of the events of the last few weeks, and in particular of the last few days. I'm joined for tonight's debate by John Palassin, who's a former economic advisor to Arnaud Montebourg, also by Pierre-Jérôme Hénin, who's a consultant based here in Paris, also joined by Zoe Lefko-Friedi, who is assistant professor of comparative politics at Salzburg University, also by Leonidas Kalogeropoulos, who is a vice president of ethics and author of Liberty, Equality, Fraternity and Entrepreneurship. We're also joined down the line by James Galbraith, of course, the economist, author of a number of books, and an advisor to Alexis Tsipras. I'd like to turn to you, Mr. Galbraith, if I may. We've been talking over the course of the last half hour or so about what Alexis Tsipras' referendum has meant, and no doubt it's going to mean a good deal of soul-searching for the EU. A number of our guests seem to believe that could be a good thing in some ways. He has nonetheless played fast and loose with the Greek people and their interests, has he not?
No, I don't believe he has. Let me make a number of points related to the conversation that we've had so far. First of all, the information that I gave earlier about the responsibility of the European institutions came in large part from the testimony of a well-informed observer, who happens to be a Frenchman, an economist by the name of Philippe Legrand, who was an advisor to President Barroso of the European Commission. And it is from that source that one can learn a great deal, his testimony to the Greek Parliamentary Commission on the debt, and one can learn a great deal about the joint responsibility and the severe responsibility of the leaders of Europe for the debacle that has ensued from 2010 onward. We've had, of course, some comments on the question of the Greek government's mendacity with respect to statistics leading up to 2010. That was a matter in which the European statistical authorities were also fully complicit. But in any event, one cannot lay to the door of this government, which was elected in January and consists of an element of Greek politics which never before had state responsibility, all of the faults of the governments of the previous two-party regime, New Democracy and PASOK, which are uncontested by anybody. We have to ask, where do we go from here with a fresh government? And what we've gone through in the last 4 months is an effort that has been called negotiations. I have followed it very closely. These negotiations have had a very peculiar character. One side has made all the proposals, that is the Greek side, and they've come up with proposal after proposal. And they have made all the concessions. And the other side has said to each proposal, no, it's not good enough. Turn around, come back a few days later with yet another one. This process is going on as we speak. The Greeks are being told to just disregard their previous proposals and come up with another one. What is the only acceptable outcome of this from the standpoint of the creditors? Wolfgang Schäuble has made this very clear. He's made it very clear to Yanis Varoufakis, which is that the only thing that's acceptable is to go back to the agreements that were in place before this present government was elected, and that is to say, to force it to nullify all of its reason for existence. That, unless this government is forced to capitulate by force majeure, by the effort of complete strangulation of the Greek economy, which is presently underway through the forced closing down of its banking system. And I can tell you the effect of that is uniquely sadistic in Greece because it affects elderly pensioners who rely on ATMs, who rely on banknotes in order to have their daily bread. And those are the ones who are stressed out at this present time because they can't get the money on which they live. And in any event, they're frail people who cannot really withstand the rigors of having to wait in long lines in the heat in the Athens summer. Most other people are all right, but you are really targeting a very vulnerable group of people and bringing pressure on, for the purpose of bringing pressure on the government. I think every European of goodwill and every person of goodwill has to regard that as a vile and reprehensible.
Can I ask a question to Mr. Galbraith?
Can
I ask you a question, if I may?
Because the point was made that the no side favored the euro. That is true. The no side did favor and does favor the euro. But we should remember who said otherwise and who told the Greek people a week ago Monday that a vote for no was a vote to go out of the euro. That was said by the French President, François Hollande. It was said by David Cameron. It was said by Sigmar Gabriel. It was said by by Matteo Renzi in a concerted effort to convey a false impression to the Greek people in order to terrify them
I'd like to put that to
voting for the yes.
To Leonidas Kalogeropoulos.
I would like to really wonder with Mr. Galbraith, why shouldn't Spanish people, Portuguese people, Slovenian people, perhaps tomorrow, I don't know, perhaps French people, after all, could come and say, we want the same treatment as Greeks. After all, why shouldn't that be a precedent? Why is it that suddenly very respectable 11 million people in Europe, 2% of the population, the European population, should be able to exige as being their legitimate right more than 98% of other Europeans to have this exceptional treatment?
The issue at stake is not that one.
Yes, it is that one.
No, sir, it's
because
not.
At the moment, other politics is to choose.
The issue at stake is not.
Mr. Galbraith, well, if I could, just a moment, I would just like first of all, to be able to hear from Jean Palassin. You wanted to reply to that?
I'd like to answer that because the issue is not somebody not behaving by the rules and being the bad student, whether others are good student. The issue, because it's an important issue, it's an issue more important than the one you're analysing. Well, let me finish, please. It's more. The issue is more important. It's to know whether the system is working or not. And the message, the wonderful message which came from Greece, is that we've been suffering a lot. Please understand, the system is not working. It's not working in Greece. Maybe it hasn't worked elsewhere. We have prominent economists, Nobel Prizes, telling us it's not working. We must find a solution. And one new issue which is on the table since the Greek referendum, which has never been examined before, which is the heart of the problem, is whether we can restructure the Greek debt or not. Everybody has said from the beginning that debt is not sustainable. Everybody said, no, it's my money, I want my money back. But that debt is not sustainable. Everybody knew we would get to this point. So now we're facing the precipice. We'll find a political solution. And please, let's stop talking about those who are responsible and those who are not. We're all Europeans.
And back to Mr. Galbraith, it is a question of rules, and the rules must apply to everyone, a question of trust and respecting the rules that have been fixed and not changing them in the middle of the game.
Well, no, that's not entirely true. In every hospital I've ever been associated with or known about, there is something called an intensive care unit. And when you have a case which is particularly serious, you don't apply the same treatments. You take the patient to the ward and you give them all kinds of extraordinary measures in order to put them back in a condition where they can recover. That is what has not been done with Greece. And is this a precedent? Yes, I think there is or ought to be a right. There's certainly a right, as stated very clearly in the Maastricht treaties, and I can give you the work of a very distinguished Italian constitutional jurist on this, Giuseppe Guarino, a former finance minister in the government of Andreotti, that gives every European a right to economic policies that promote growth and social justice. So if the Greek people are demanding this, and if that sets a precedent, so the Spanish people who are also been subjected to an extraordinarily high unemployment rate and breakdown in their social and in their functioning economy, and if they take that as a precedent, and if that has an effect on their politics, I say so be it. If that happens in Portugal and Ireland, yes, that's a good thing. That's something we should look forward to because it will bring about a constructive change, and it's the only way in the long run that Europe can be saved. If Europe continues down the path of blaming the victims for their own, exclusively for their own economic difficulties and washing its hands like Pontius Pilate of its own responsibility, Europe is certainly not going to survive. You cannot run a continental economy on that basis for any long period of time.
Zoe, going back to that point that was made a little while ago, Alexis Tsipras then will have done Europe a favour by bringing this issue to the brink and by pointing out that this system was simply not sustainable for the whole bloc.
Yes, and I want to make 2 points that connect to the previous ones about equality of rules, equal application of rules, and what is the significance of the precedent. First, if you remember, the first countries that violated this Growth and Stability Pact were Germany and Portugal in 2003, and then Germany and France in 2004, if I'm not mistaken. But at that time, while the Commission was demanding punishment, there was a political agreement that these economies need more time, and this time was given to these economies. So I think that, you know, like showing understanding and giving some more time in order to reach the target has happened before. And the second thing is the precedent regarding the Grexit. If Greece goes now, who is next? I'm sure that the markets will find the next target. So then we will have the collapse of the Eurozone very fast, which is not in the interest of any Eurozone member, and most importantly, the big economies that trade and use the euro. And it's very beneficial.
This is a point to both of you that's been made a number of times, that Europe simply cannot afford to allow Greece to go.
Yes, I think I want to just bounce back on what you just said. Yet, what would be the price of letting loose Greece instead of maintaining within the EU and, of course, the Eurozone? I think we will have to pay a much higher price letting Greece loose. We don't have to think only in terms of economics and unemployment, competitiveness, debt, and so on and so forth, but also I think in terms of geopolitics. If you look at a map, see where Greece is located today, close to Turkey, close to the Middle East, and so on and so forth, I think it would be very dangerous for us to let the country alone, living on its own, and that the price that we'll have to eventually pay would be much higher than one can imagine today.
I'm sorry to disagree on this point, because there are two different issues, which is your Eurozone and the European Union. And there's never been any issue about leaving the European Union. So first point. The second point, it is that leaving the Eurozone... I'm sorry, I'm going to the end of this idea. The second point is that there are many aids and accompaniment possible, with a lot of money which is available to help Greece evolve in a system which can allow Greece to come back into the Eurozone. Nevertheless, I am absolutely convinced that as long as this permanent effort to keep Greece in the Eurozone is the main and unique goal we're looking after, we're not going to let Greece in the situation where it's going to take its economy in hand to put it back onto feet. And the other point, which is very important to answer to what Mr. said at the beginning, is that leaving Greece out of the Eurozone for a certain amount of years, perhaps 4 or 5 years, to envisage it coming back, means at a moment or another, to abandon the debt, and abandoning the debt is a reality. And as long as this reality too isn't seen in front, we're going nowhere. But the two issues are together. The debt cannot be sustainable, but keeping Greece under permanent aid under the Eurozone gives the illusion that Greece could go back on its feet by only help of the others, where it absolutely needs, first of all, help of itself.
A quick look at one of your tweets just before I turn to Jean-Pierre. Grexit is not an option for Greece, says one of you, demand for the proper measures from Tsipras so to keep Greece and Europe united. You wanted to speak to the point that was just made.
Yes, because it's a very interesting scheme which was just mentioned. It's to say that maybe the Europeans should invent a system where countries which cannot cope with the level of the currency, because that's what is at stake, should exit the Union and then later on come back in. Why do I believe that it's the wrong path for Europe? It's because if you decide that, you will have a block of very strong economies, northern economies, which have the competitiveness and the power to cope with that level of currency, and we'll have other economies which will see their own currency constantly attacked by the markets, very unstable. And the final aim of all those systems we are building, which are not only for economics, is to build a political structure where those countries can dialogue and build a common future. That goal will be missed. And I think that it's precisely the point where we are now. We should put the political goal first before the economic reasoning. Maybe it's seeing the things a bit simply, but I think it's the situation now.
Perhaps we can envisage together that the main political goal of Europe is to come back to a fundamental, which is individual and collective responsibility, but where there isn't in permanent the idea that Europe could be responsible for the others. People have to take their own responsibility if they are going to cooperate to the construction of this ensemble. And that's what's not succeeding to come along with Greece.
There is at the heart of this debate, of course, the question of the political future of the European Union, of what sort of European Union is going to emerge from this particular mess. One of the debates that's been launched is the sort of Europe of austerity versus the Europe of growth, to put it broadly and crudely. Zoe, this is the debate that is actually being launched now, and one that Europe's going to have to decide on very quickly, with perhaps some countries choosing to go down one direction and others choosing another.
But you know what has happened, and nobody talks about it, and this is the most positive development of this crisis, that Europeans talk about Europe. We have never had this before. Even in European elections, we're talking about national issues. So this, again, it's a historical opportunity. And instead of incorporating the discourse of the Eurosceptics, you know, this black and white, the Brussels monster, and we spend too much money there, and we lose culture, and, you know, all these like very simplistic and most often very false messages. Instead of incorporating that discourse, why don't you have from the pro-European mainstream parties, you have, you know, why is Europe good? What does it bring? We want this discourse now, because now we have the politicization. So I think, you know, that you can see a lot of positive going on. It's just that instead of being scared, these national leaders that we have, they have to be a little bit braver.
One of the problems, though, is that they're divided.
Yeah, just one thing. Before deciding where we want to go, how Europe should be shaped within the next 20, 30 years, should be a more federal Europe or not, we ought once again to decide what do we want to do together. Who wants to be involved in defense issues, who wants to be in trade issues, research, agriculture, and so on and so forth. We have to put all these subjects on the table, the euro, who wants to be part of it, who wants to stay in it, and so on and so forth. And once we have decided which country will do this, at what pace, then we can decide how to get there. This is very important.
And one of the issues, of course, at the heart of what you've just mentioned, Jean Palassin, is the issue that seems to divide the two main or very important leaders of the European Union, of course, Angela Merkel and the Eurozone, in particular Angela Merkel and François Hollande. And we've seen over the last few days, over this particular issue, those tensions re-emerge. They simply have different views of whether austerity is the right path, or whether something else needs to be considered now.
Yes, because the French position historically is to try to be that. It's very pretentious to say so, but that's what happened in '97 when Spain and Portugal joined the Eurozone. It was the French Prime Minister who went to Berlin and said, a socialist socialist Prime Minister was elected in France. Our view is that we need a balanced Eurozone and those countries should join. I thought what you just said is very interesting, because the dead end we were in this Greek debate is the same as the dead end we are in the debate over migrants. Matteo Renzi was alone. He said, I have an issue, I'm alone. And you mentioned the defense debate. I wish we could put on the table the spending, the French spending, the British spending, maybe the Greek situation regarding defense. Why did President Obama support Alexis Tsipras? Because there are other issues at stake. I wish we could put all those issues on the table and not only the financial issue. And of course, the German position would be very different. Maybe the Germans should fund also our defense spendings. Maybe we should spend money for Italy and border countries to deal with migration. All those issues should be put on the table, not only one.
We have to go back to politics, and Europe has to go back into politics, and that is the main responsibility of the heads of state and government. Tsipras is a very good politician. The others, I'm not sure.
He certainly brought back on the table this question. And however one regards his manoeuvring, his negotiation tactics over the last few weeks.
In tactics, he's been great. Of course, I understand Greeks are proud of him. I'm afraid he's bringing his country to very big difficulties. But the fact is that obviously in front of him, there are not such good politicians, and they've got such great difficulties to find the right answer. to him and find an answer together. But the fact is that what he's giving as an option, and I come back to this idea that was presented by one of the members of his government as being another way into economics, another model. I'm afraid this other model is a model which is not sustainable. And I totally agree to put all the issues on the table. But all these issues, defense, immigrants, what we're going to do with all these other countries who need the development all around Europe, need a strong economy. And I'm sorry, but if we are not, first of all, aiming to have a strong economy in Europe, we are certainly not going to be able to make front to that kind of very difficult difficulties we've got in front of us.
Think just 1 second about the image given by the situation. Same thing for the migration. They've been discussing for days and days about 40,000 migrants. In Lebanon, you have nearly a third of the population refugees, right? Here we're talking about 40,000. Who's going to deal with that? Which is absolutely ridiculous. Same thing. Greece is 2% of the European GDP, 0.4% of its exports, and we can't deal with the situation.
Summit after summit.
Summit after summit.
And more summits to come, which of course...
If I may, I would like to add, because I sat down and read those documents of the 26th of June when the negotiations broke. And you know, the differences are very small. So they don't have another economic model. They had conceded to everything. The only difference was that there was a one-time 12% corporate tax for profit above 0.5 million that the Troika found as anti-growth and dismissed it. And some details about how gradual or immediate some measures would be. But otherwise, it was the same. So it was really the same. So the only difference was the debt. Because you cannot go as a government that has been elected on the issue of the debt, plus all those measures that would never happen. So you have conceded to everything, but you have to go back and have something to give back and say, you know what, we will have pain, but at least we got this.
Well, no doubt more to come from the summit, the Eurozone meeting of Saturday, the summit of Sunday, in the beginning perhaps of the conversation that we've alluded to here today. It's time now for a quick look at what's been being said on social media. It's time for Media Watch. Shona Bhattacharya has joined us. Good evening, Shona. Of course,
Melissa.
This is attracting a great deal of interest on the internet as well.
Yes, that's right. We've even got Pierre Lelouch, a French MP, who's also been talking about the crisis in Greece. He has an opinion, as many people do, about what's going on there and how it should be handled. He's an MP from Les Républicains, so the ex-UMP party on the right here in France, and he actually used to be Secretary of European Affairs under Sarkozy, so you would think that he would know better before... I'm sorry, my computer isn't turning on. Before summarizing the financial crisis in Greece in just a few words. Now, unfortunately, it seems that I cannot show you what I had prepared for you, but I can tell you that he was invited to a French radio station on Tuesday, and he made some remarks that Le Monde found quite simplistic. And so one of them was that Mr. Tsipras is doing politics with other people's money. There was sort of a list of these short, sweet sound bites that actually don't really mean anything, because when Le Monde went in and dug in and was like, all right, well, what does this actually mean? So that sentence could be broken down in two halves. First of all, that Tsipras is playing international institutions in order to get the best deal for Greece. And then secondly, that Greece is effectively living off other people's money. So we can't really prove whether Greece is playing off international institutions, but we can take a look at what Greece is living off of. And in fact, that's what Le Monde does. And yes, it looks at Greece's debt compared to other countries in Europe. So yes, Greece's debt represents a larger portion of GDP than in other countries in the graph that was in the article on Le Monde. That figures shows Germany, France, and Italy. But when you compare the deficits of these same four countries, so that means the money that's coming in versus the money that's coming out, Greece is actually not that badly placed. You've only got Germany that has a surplus, but actually France has a lower has a higher deficit rate than Greece does, in fact. So Pierre Lelouch wasn't wrong, but he was telling just a half-truth, which is that, yes, Tsipras is, most certainly dealing with other people's money, but so is France. And there has to be some kind of a level comparison at times.
They'll look there at some of the things being said on the internet about this debate. Thank you very much indeed, Shona Bhattacharya. Thank you to all my guests for taking part in tonight's debate. As we were saying, no doubt, the beginning of a much longer, broader debate to come over the course of the coming weeks. That brings us to the end of tonight's France 24 debate. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight on France 24. We'll be back again tomorrow for another debate.